It was a foggy morning, and the sun was shining through the fog. The beauty of the Australian landscape captivated everyone. 19-year-old Mason, who was in a bus speeding along the highway ahead, was taking in the beauty of his surroundings. At 5 feet 2 inches tall, Mason was a gentle, youthful man. His delicate features made people generally think he was a much younger man. His smooth, beardless face, framed by black hair, gave him an angelic innocence. His beautiful, expressive eyes had a quiet depth, a thoughtful introspection that seemed older than his years. Mason was traveling by bus to his grandmother's house that morning. Mason was going to spend time in his grandmother's beautiful village as usual, as he had been on his college vacation since the day before. This year, the special thing was that his mother's sister's daughter, Nova, was also able to join them. In other words, she was staying at their grandmother's house to go to her college. With the freedom of vacation from college, Mason's mind was set to wander in a world of thoughts. Sitting by a window of the bus and admiring the beauty around him, there was a special desire that had long been hidden in Mason's beautiful appearance. As mentioned earlier, this desire had followed him like his shadow, since he could remember. It was nothing more than a desire that made Mason's heart yearn to enter the world of amazing femininity. His passion for cross-dressing was more than just a passing curiosity. It was a deep desire hidden in his mind. He would often get lost in those beautiful dreams, imagining the smooth swing of a soft skirt around his legs, the click of elegant heels on a hard floor, the scent of makeup wafting through, or the luxurious feel of delicate fabrics on his skin. Nova was 23, a few years older than Mason, and her smile doubled her beauty. Her long curtain bangs hair served to enhance the beauty of her face. Mason remembered Nova as kind and approachable from the few family gatherings they attended together. Finally, the bus stopped in the quiet and beautiful city where Violet lived. In that beautiful city, jasmine smell welcomed Mason with love. As he got off the bus, Mason saw 2 familiar figures waiting for him at the bus stop. Violet, a kind and beautiful-looking woman, and Nova, a charming woman, were waiting for him. Seeing Mason's arrival, Violet and Nova came to Mason. They hugged Mason with comforting warmth. Their warm welcome helped Mason overcome his travel fatigue. The ride to Violet's house was filled with happy conversation, laughter, and excitement. Mason watched Nova intently. She was wearing a beautiful, short frock that was captivating, and a pair of delicate, strappy sandals. Her lipstick color added beauty to Nova's face. Mason, who was watching all this with interest, realized that it was only increasing his desire for cross-dressing. The days that followed were peaceful. Violet's home was a comfortable single-story house, set in a beautifully landscaped garden with a variety of flowers, plants, and items. Mason loved spending time in such a beautiful setting, away from the busy city. In the meantime, Mason helped with chores, explored the charming village with Nova, and listened to Violet's fascinating stories about history. But Mason's passion for cross-dressing did not fade, even in these peaceful days. Mason's desire grew stronger every time he looked at Nova's wardrobe. There were various blouses, skirts, dresses, accessories, and delicate women's underwear. Every time he saw Nova's beautiful women's clothes, Mason felt as if those women's clothes were inviting him. Meanwhile, one morning, Violet casually mentioned that she and Nova were going to visit a friend of hers, and that they would be a few hours away from returning. After Violet and Nova left the house, Mason locked the main door from the inside. As Mason sat in the living room, alone in Violet's quiet house, an insubordinate thought came to his mind. It was none other than the desire for cross-dressing that had been locked away in his mind until now. Mason's insubordinate mind told Mason that this was the best opportunity to experience the softness of Nova's beautiful clothes. Mason did not know that this thought was powerful enough to change his destiny. Mason took the opportunity to go to Nova's room with determination. Mason slowly walked into Nova's room. His hands trembled as he opened the closet, finding it filled with colorful women's clothing. Mason's eyes were drawn to one dress in particular. It was a short gown made of delicate pink lace and pink silk. Mason didn't think twice about smoothing the dress. Mason's hand slowly reached the dress. Taking the dress in his hand, Mason began to dress in it. The chosen frock did not fit Mason's body size, so he had to make a great effort to move it around his broad shoulders and chest. But in a moment, Mason's effort was successful. He was able to dress in the frock. When Mason turned to look at Nova's full-length mirror, it took him a moment to recognize the person looking back at him. Mason was delighted when he realized that he was the one adorned in an attractive frock. Dressed only in a frock, Mason stared at his mirror reflection, lost in a dream world. Mason, dressed only in a frock, looked at his mirror reflection and entered a dream world. Mason imagined himself wearing makeup, wearing beautiful necklaces and earrings, and wearing high heels. At that moment, something inside him felt complete. He felt as if he had stepped into his world that had been hidden for a long time. But Mason's magical world was shattered by a sudden sound. He heard the sound of a familiar car engine from Violet's garden. The sound froze Mason. Then, as the front door opened, he sensed the sudden arrival of Violet and Nova. Mason felt a pang of fear as he realized that Violet and Nova had returned unexpectedly. His heart was pounding. Mason hurried to unzip the frock he was wearing, but his shaking hands made it difficult to unzip it. At the same time, the frock was stubbornly clinging to his body, making it impossible for him to remove it. He was getting more and more trapped in the frock. The living room door suddenly opened, and Violet was about to call Mason's name. Meanwhile, Mason heard Nova's footsteps coming towards Nova's room, where Mason was. In a few moments, Nova entered her room. Nova was shocked to see Mason. Nova screamed in fear, so Violet also came. Seeing Mason tangled in Nova's frock, Violet's face became calmer and more curious. Everyone was silent for a moment because of this unexpected scene. Nova's shock quickly turned to words. "Mason, what are you doing wearing one of my frocks?" she shouted. Her displeasure and sharp voice pierced the silence. Mason's cheeks flushed with fear and embarrassment. He stammered, trying to find the words, but he couldn't. Mason stood awkwardly, enduring it all. The beautiful dress still clung tightly to him. Mason wondered how he could have been so stupid as to do such a risky thing. Before Mason could say anything, Violet stepped forward. Her tone was unexpectedly kind. "Why are you wearing Nova's dress, Mason?" she asked, her voice warm and comforting. Mason, feeling a little relieved by Violet's comforting behavior, breathed a sigh of relief. Mason began to reveal a passion that had been hidden within him for many years. He spoke of his fascination with women's clothing and his curiosity about wearing them. Mason said that he had not worn Nova's frock with any bad intentions, but simply because of his long-held desire to cross-dressing. Violet's mature behavior at this moment was a relief to Mason. Violet listened to Mason's story with good understanding. Violet's behavior surprised Mason. Violet's face was filled with kindness as Mason confessed. When Mason finished his story, Violet let out a sigh of relief and a small smile. "I understand, honey," she said. "I can understand you. Don't worry now. We believe your story, honey." Nova, still a little angry, interrupted Violet. "But why did you take my dress?" she asked, her tone now more confused than angry. "Mason, you should have asked." "That's the most beautiful," Mason said softly, looking down so that his voice could barely be heard. Violet took Mason's hand and tried to comfort him. Her grip was a symbol of the genuine cooperation that emerged from her. "Well, it looks like we have a few things to work out," she said amusedly, looking at the frock wrapped around Mason's body. "We'll get you out of this first, okay?" With careful and gentle tugs, they finally managed to loosen the tight dress over Mason's chest, and the frock finally gave up its grip. The tension in the room eased at once, and a subtle understanding was restored between Mason and Violet. Nova was still a little hesitant, but Violet's behavior made Nova try to understand this special moment. Violet, who had been silent until now, raised her voice. "Mason, you came to my house to spend your vacation freely and happily, right? So I don't want you to be sad. I can understand your feelings. I'll help you make this a different kind of vacation. If you really want to dress like a girl, I'd love to help you." Mason stared at Violet in shock at what he had heard. "Really?" he inquired, attempting to verify what he had heard. "Really?" Violet confirmed with her usual smile. Then, with a sharp look at Nova, she added, "But we have to do this together." "Nova, Mason needs to buy some clothes that fit him, right?" Nova blinked, her steps a little softer this time. "I think my clothes definitely don't suit him. His body is bigger than mine." "Yes, that's true," Violet agreed with Nova. "We definitely need to buy some clothes and other things for Mason." The next morning dawned bright and clear, with warm sunlight that heralded new hopes and a fresh start. Mason and Nova traveled under Violet's guidance. Together, they walked from shop to shop, perusing the shelves filled with colorful dresses, soft skirts, delicate blouses, and beautiful female underwear. Mason felt a desire he had been hiding for years, slowly coming true. As he walked around looking for beautiful female clothes, his feminine feelings grew even more. He felt a quiet joy at Violet's support for his hidden desire. For the first time in his life, Mason was free to openly discuss his desire to cross-dress. While Mason was trying to choose from a variety of beautiful bras and deciding on the right size, a young man walked by. His rugged appearance was familiar to Mason. Mason recognized him immediately. He was none other than Jackson. Jackson lived a few houses down from Violet's house. Jackson's gaze lingered for a long time. Mason put the bra he was holding aside. But by then, Jackson's gaze had already shifted to the bras in Mason's hand. Jackson's expression changed, and he left without saying a word. Nova's eyes fell on the changed face of Jackson as he left, and a small frown crossed her face. "It's Jackson," she said nervously. He was looking at us strangely. He was looking at Mason in particular. I think he must have become suspicious of Mason. "I didn't see him," Violet replied smoothly, but something unreadable lay behind her calm face. Nova raised her voice again. "It must have been strange to him that we came shopping for women's clothes with Mason." Her cheeks were flushed. Violet smiled and patted Nova on the shoulder reassuringly. "Let him think what he wants. We don't care what he thinks." They continued shopping, and the stress they had felt before gradually disappeared. It paved the way for Mason to find joy. With the help of Violet and Nova, Mason chose several attractive frocks, several skirts, several blouses made of thin fabrics, padded bras, silk underskirts, night dresses, and some lace underwear that made his cheeks blush. Then he chose some heels and flat shoes. These simple and stylish choices were able to highlight Mason's femininity. As he saw the increasing number of female items, Mason's heart fluttered with freedom and happiness. Their next stop was a specialty store that catered to the cross-dressing community. Always a ready and thoughtful guide, Violet confidently led Mason through the store. This was a perfect example of Violet's understanding of cross-dressing. Violet chose a realistic silicone breast form that helped Mason look naturally feminine under his feminine clothing. Violet bought shapewear for Mason that created a wide hip area and a protruding rear area. Their last stop was a wig shop. Inside the shop, the walls were lined with racks of wigs in all sorts of styles and colors, and choosing one was no easy task. After trying on several wigs in different styles, Mason finally chose a long, wavy brown wig. It enhanced the femininity of his face and gave him a beautiful, natural look. When Mason looked at himself in the mirror after putting on the wig he had chosen, he saw a beautiful girl dressed in a man's outfit. When they returned to Violet's house, their arms were full of shopping bags filled with frocks, skirts, underwear, and accessories. Everything Mason needed for his transformation was packed in those bags. Mason's dream, which had been hidden until now, was slowly becoming a reality. That feeling made Mason think happily. The next day, the sun rose, heralding Mason's transformation. Violet, who had been playing the role of mentor, had decided that Mason's transformation should begin early in the morning. Nova decided on a suitable female name to address Mason after his transformation. The female name was Mia. Violet fulfilled her mentor role with great interest and guided Mia through every subtle step of the transformation process. Mason began the process of dressing as a woman by removing the hair from his body. With Violet's guidance, Mason put on a panty, body shaper, and underskirt. Then Violet attached the breast form they had bought to Mason's chest using glue. Step by step, Mason was moving forward along the path of becoming a beautiful young woman. Mason wore a red frock with help of Violet. Foundation, mascara, blusher, and lipstick began to erase Mason's masculine features one by one, revealing soft feminine features. Then, the Nova wig was placed on his head, and a simple hairstyle was applied. The wig transformed his masculine look into a completely feminine one. Finally, after attaching clip-on earrings to Mason's ears and putting on a pair of heels, the initial transformation into a woman was completed. In the end, Mason's appearance became that of a beautiful young woman that the three of them could never have imagined. With 1,000 hopes in his heart, Mason started to accept his new identity as Mia. Mason learned the delicate art of makeup from Violet. She described how lipstick, blush, and mascara draw attention to delicate feminine features. Mason practiced her first steps in heels in the living room, with Violet's patient assistance. She taught her how to maintain balance, carry herself with poise, and express confidence in the way she moved and held herself. After Mason's transformation was complete, everyone was amazed at Mason's feminine appearance. The beautiful girl who had been confined to a man's dress for so long had emerged. Violet thanked Mason for deciding to dress as a girl. Nova, who had initially expressed some resistance, gradually lost her resistance to Mason's new feminine appearance. Slowly, Mason got used to the feminine role he was given. Nova captured Mason's femininity on her camera. Violet, Nova, and Mason spent full days trying to do subtle things to enhance Mason's femininity. As the sun set and darkness fell, Mason took off the clothes and makeup he had been wearing and changed into his soft and simple nightgown, hoping for a good night's sleep. The next day, Mason's transformation into Mia took place as usual. Mason was gradually getting used to doing his transformation on his own. Nova, who had been watching the entire process silently, with amusement and mild suspicion, gradually became actively involved in Mason's transformation process. Seeing Mason flaunt his beautiful feminine figure, Nova slowly understood Mason's passion. Nova began giving Mason advice on women's clothing, ladies' fashion, and even gave Mia her jewelry and accessories. Some afternoons, the two of them acted like playful girls. Nova trained Mason's rough male voice to have a soft, feminine voice full of elegance. "Remember, Mia," Violet said with constant encouragement, using the feminine name they had chosen for Mason, "it's not enough for you to just look like a girl in your clothes. You need to pay attention to feminine elegance." Mason listened intently to the advice given by Violet and Nova. He listened deeply to every lesson he received, spent hours in front of the mirror, practicing his posture, his smile, his walk. Mason did not forget to pay attention not only to his appearance, but also to feminine gestures. He realized that the name Mia suited him, as it was a soft name that enhanced his feminine feelings. One evening, as the sun began to set, Mason was walking in Violet's garden in 3-inch high heels. As he walked in the garden, he noticed a familiar figure appear in the distance. It was none other than Jackson. He was walking along the sidewalk towards Violet's house. His steps slowed noticeably as he approached Mason. His gaze fell on Mason, who was dressed like a girl. Jackson's eyes widened in surprise at the sight. He passed Mason a little awkwardly, but with a small smile. But Mason sensed the mystery that was holding Jackson's eyes. Mason was unaware that Jackson was quietly watching Mia from the sidelines. Jackson was intrigued by Mason's appearance as Mia, and somewhat confused, he began secretly taking photos of Mason dressed as Mia. Jackson couldn't explain why he was doing this. Maybe it was simple curiosity. Maybe it was something deeper. But over the past few days, Jackson had been collecting a small number of explicit photos. In a brief conversation a few days later, Jackson told Violet that his family was out of town for a short trip, and he was home alone. At the time, the information seemed trivial, nothing more than small talk. Mason, Violet, and Nova lived with a new rhythm and joy in Violet's house. Mason lived comfortably in his female form, practicing his makeup and helping with the housework. He was very happy to be able to freely fulfill his long-hidden desire to cross-dress. One early morning, Mason sat in the living room, dressed in a beautiful frock he had chosen and with simple makeup. In a moment, Violet and Nova joined him. The three of them began a lovely conversation, filling the living room with soft smiles and freedom. But this did not last long. Suddenly, the front door opened without a knock. Jackson entered the living room through the open door. Everyone was uneasy at this sight. Mason was in a state where he could not even think about what he should do now. Mason froze. His heart was beating fast. Violet and Nova turned to Jackson in shock. Jackson looked at Mason with a sly smile. Without saying anything, he showed everyone a few photos of Mason dressing up as a girl from his cell phone. Seeing that, Mason's fear increased. He couldn't even imagine what was going to happen and stared at the photos helplessly. "How are the photos I took?" "Beautiful?" Jackson said with a sly smile. Everyone understood that Jackson was behaving like a brave lion, knowing Mason's important secret. Violet, who had been silent until now, raised her voice. Her face was filled with anger. "Jackson," she said with a bit of anger, her voice strong enough to break Jackson's dominance. "Why are you acting like this? You've seriously damaged Mason's privacy." Jackson, who had been quiet for a while due to Violet's questions, returned to his usual rhythm. "Those things don't matter to me." If you don't listen to me, I'll have to post Mason's photos on Facebook. If I do that, everyone will make fun of Mason. Do you want that to happen? I don't mean to do anything bad. My family was on a trip for a few days, and I'm the only one home. It's a little boring at home. My suggestion is that Mason dress up as a girl and come help me with my homework. I can't do my homework alone. Everyone who heard Jackson's words was shocked and surprised. Violet's entire living room was filled with silence. Jackson looked lustfully at Mason, who was dressed as a beautiful young woman, waiting for an answer. Violet's entire living room fell into a further stunned silence. Violet, Nova, and Mason stared at each other in disbelief. Jackson's unexpected request had everyone in a state of confusion. No way! Nova's voice broke the silence, her voice rising in anger. Jackson, we will never agree to your request. You had no right to take Mason's photos, and you have no right to make such a request. Violet looked equally disturbed, her brow furrowed with concern. Jackson, she said sternly, that is entirely inappropriate. Mason is our guest, our friend, and we're not going to send him over dressed up for your entertainment or for your homework. Mason sat frozen. His heart was beating fast, and his thoughts were filled with confusion. He was overcome with shame and fear, and he had no idea what to do. Jackson's smile faded, and his expression became tense. Suddenly, his tone changed to an angry one. Are you kidding me? I'm not asking for your permission. If you don't do what I ask, I'm going to post this all on Facebook, Jackson said, regaining control that had slipped from him. Violet's living room fell silent again. It was clear to everyone that Jackson would not give up until he got his request. Mason's stomach twisted. The very thought of those private moments, the carefully nurtured steps of her transformation, being broadcast online, made her feel sick. Everything could fall apart. Her safety, her freedom, her fragile, blossoming self. Mason watched helplessly, unable to comprehend what had happened to him. Violet and Nova's attempts to save Mason also failed. It was becoming clear to everyone that there was no escape from Jackson. Violet and Nova looked at the faces of the others. They realized that acting angrily against Jackson could hurt Mason. Their attempts to explain kindly also failed. After a long silence, Mason raised his voice. Okay, Jackson, I'll do anything for you. A voice mixed with sadness and fear came out of Mason's mouth. Jackson looked at Mason and smiled slightly, somewhat suppressing the pressure and anger that had been inside him. Mason's answer surprised Violet and Nova, and they both looked at Mason at the same time. No, Mason, you don't have to do that, Violet said suddenly, her voice filled with warning. She reached out and placed her hand on Mason's arm. You don't have to do anything you don't want to do. He can't blackmail you like this. You don't have to be Jackson's victim, Nova said sharply. Her anger grew, but Mason shook his head slowly. Nova, I don't have anything else to do, he said again softly. It's better to work at his home. It's better than everyone knowing about me. Isn't it? After a heated discussion, Violet and Nova reluctantly agreed to Mason's decision. However, their words were filled with worry and disapproval. Mason's decision left them disappointed. Jackson's face showed that Mason's positive response had filled his heart with joy. Jackson cast a lustful glance at Mason and left the scene, saying that he was expecting Mason's arrival. That evening, Mason, dressed as a woman, walked down the short path to Jackson's house. The air was cool, and the setting sun was fading, making the atmosphere a bit dark. Mason's heart rate gradually increased as he slowly approached Jackson's house. Without any concern about what would happen to him, he arrived right next to Jackson's house. With a trembling hand, Mason rang the doorbell on Jackson's main door. At the same time, Jackson opened the main door. Jackson greeted Mason, who was dressed as a woman, at his door and invited Mason into his home. Jackson's home was a surprisingly tidy one. The calming appearance of the house helped Mason's troubled mind calm down a bit. After a few moments of silence, the two of them decided to have a short conversation. The conversation between the two of them managed to ease Mason's fear. In the middle of that brief conversation, Jackson went back to his bedroom. Jackson went to his closet and pulled out a black and white maid dress that had been neatly tucked away. In addition, he picked up a small box containing accessories that matched the outfit. Jackson's face showed the joy he felt when a long-held desire came true. Mason's cheeks burned when he saw Jackson carrying a black and white maid dress. The dress in Jackson's hands looked strange. Mason had never even thought about wearing a dress like this before. The maid dress, which had a unique look that set it apart from similar women's clothing, was able to evoke feminine feelings in Mason's mind. Jackson handed Mason the maid dress he had brought and showed him the way to his bedroom. Mason took the maid dress and went to Jackson's bedroom. He took off the frock he was wearing and put on the maid dress. The dress was tight and short on his body. Its ruffled skirt reached only to mid-thigh. The soft skirt and lace apron around his waist added to its beauty. Mason felt that his body was exposed too much because of that maid dress, but those clothes were able to create a strange curiosity and mischievous feelings in his heart. Mason immediately went to the full-length mirror in Jackson's bedroom, curious to see his new appearance. Mason was shocked by the reflection he saw in the mirror. The image of a lustful woman was unfamiliar to him. Mason was suddenly filled with fear, unable to imagine what would happen to him, alone in a big house with such a lustful image and a strong man. Unsure of what would happen next, Mason started to walk away from Jackson's bedroom. As he emerged from the bedroom, he saw Jackson's face, awaiting his arrival. When Mason came out of the bedroom, Jackson's eyes widened. Jackson couldn't believe Mason's feminine figure, dressed in a maid dress and looking sexy. "Wow," Jackson said at once. Jackson's behavior made Mason's makeup-covered cheeks blush even more. Mason looked down shyly, adjusting the short skirt he was wearing. He lowered his eyes, avoiding Jackson's gaze. Mason felt like this was a dream. Jackson raised his voice, breaking the silence. "Then start doing your homework now," he said, pointing to a small table in his bedroom filled with papers. For the next few hours, Mason had to dress up in a beautiful maid outfit and do all the tasks assigned by Jackson, such as cleaning Jackson's house, preparing snacks, and washing clothes. Jackson managed to get Mason to play the role of the maid. Gradually, the environment became dark. Even then, Violet and Nova spent their time in a state of anxiety, not knowing what had happened to Mason. Before going to bed for the night, Jackson came and showed Mason the servant room in his house. Mason was tired, so he went to the servant room and lay down on the bed there, hoping to fall asleep quickly. As Mason lay on the bed, thinking about what had happened to him, he was suddenly startled by the dim image of Jackson standing near the door of his bedroom.